won't you welcome Dr. Ali Massoud?
Actually, it is very difficult to talk in front of you, all of you people, as well as it is very difficult to talk after the great speakers that have been actually joining us during the last sessions. You follow the news, you watch the news, and usually you find many news regarding political transformation in Egypt. But regarding economic transformation in Egypt, actually you don't hear anything. Do you know why?
Doesn't exist. There is no economy.
Actually, you know so much about the political transformation in Egypt, but we don't know so much about the economic transformation about Egypt. Do you know why? Because simply, we don't care about economic transformation now in Egypt. We only talk about politics. Do you know why? Because politicians want to gain for themselves, not for their peoples. If they really worry and caring about winning for their peoples, and they selling themselves that they are working for their people, that should be the economic transformation have the same way at the same way that the political transformation has its place. So today I'm going to talk about to answer a very specific question regarding the Egyptian economy. Are we going to more free market economy in Egypt, giving the 21st of January revolution, or we are getting back to public sector and socialism? Let me make a case here. Before getting into answering this question, let me give you a sense about some features of Egyptian economy. First one, GDP per capita in Egypt is just around $1,600. So it is in low middle income countries. Main sectors in Egypt, in this industry, 17% of GDP, minerals and oil, 15% of GDP, agriculture, 14% of GDP, and the other some service like Suez canals and other sectors. Do you know that Egypt exports 47% of its exports is oil? Sometimes it is new for some people. There's something actually that hurts me very much, that in the World Competitiveness Report, Egypt came at 94, in the rank of 94, out of how many countries? 142 countries. So it is not a competitive economy. Informal economy accounts almost 1/3 of the Egyptian economy. It is informal. Guess what? What makes it even more problematic? The 70% of the food industry belongs to the informal economy. Moreover, you have 4 million street vendors, which has a very interesting guys working hard. Like I see them as future entrepreneurs, very good guys is trying to make business, a small business, but it is informal. Now, I tell you what. Regarding the role of public sector in Egypt, public sector participate also around 1/3 of the Egyptian GDP. In minerals and oil sector, 89%. It is in public sector. Why? Well, the government take money. We don't leave this oil and minerals for private sector. We are the government. We distribute that for everything. So let us put our hands in this oil and mineral stuff. So 89% of mineral and oil sector actually belongs to the public sector. When it comes to production, industry, 18%. We don't like to involve in this business, whatever. So let me give you also about a little bit of historical background regarding the public sector in Egypt. We have three main periods. The first one is after July Revolution, Nasser period. Before July Revolution of 1952, Egyptian economy used to be free market economy. Free market oriented economy. After the revolution, it turns 180 degree, that all main creative business that now nationalized to the government. And the government started to put itself in every single detail in terms of production in all sectors. So this is the main features of the Nasser period. The public sector was dominating every single thing, even making movies, even having like tomato sauce or whatever. The government should do that. No businessman can actually get you like a nice grilled onion. The government will do the best. Okay, so after that, during this Sadat period, actually, we got what we call it open door policies. I believe in person that Sadat is one of the greatest politicians ever in Egypt. He has a long strategy. He has a long-run strategy. He thinking out of the box. So at this say, okay, public sector giving no incentive for people to work very hard, then, and we have lots of problem as a result of holding just public sector flowing. So we should have more. We should be more open to international economy. We should encourage private sectors. We should disencourage actually public sector and let the private sector leads the economic development. So this is start actually with Sadat period. So the term during Nasser period was completely public sector oriented. Then during Sadat period it was like trying to hold the public sector and trying to move it into free market. But guess what? He cannot do it at once. Why? Because all Egyptians look at government like their moms. And even they are still young boys. They really depend on their mom. So you cannot say that I will take your mom from me, I will take the government from you. Then it ends up by, holding Sadat, actually Sadat's efforts to move toward open market economy. And we understand that because of political reasons, as Chris said, politics sometimes enforce government and politicians to adopt wrong policies that they know that they are wrong policies. Okay, and during Mubarak period, when we look at the relationship between public sector and private sector, we look at the privatization. It starts to privatize the public sector and so on and so on. Okay, I will tell you what. Regardless who will come into the power in Egypt, even if he is in extreme left or in extreme right, there are main policies that he is going to adopt. He has no other choice. Regarding the difference between this and that is just the scale. You take these policies, but a little bit left or a little bit right. But there are many transformations that will take place in Egypt, in the Egyptian economy. The same main ones is enhancing the role of the private sector. Do you know, assume that someone come in power in Egypt and he's socialist guy. Okay? Can he adopt socialist policy and start to push down the role of the private sector? No. Why? Because the government has no money. So exactly, the government has no money actually to take in and have building these manufacturers like Nasser said, and having and spending here and there and there. While we have a budget, well, we have at 30% a budget deficit. So the government, it is really tight-handed. So even he does not like the private sector, he will encourage the private sector to do what? To do his job. Okay, that he believes that his job. Actually, it is not his job, but he believes that this is his job. Okay.
Did you say 50% budget deficit, 50 or 15?
What?
Okay, that is, no.
You said 30% deficit?
30%.
And how much is that, absolute?
Around $270 million. Billion. Okay. The second thing that enhancing the competitiveness of the Egyptian economy. This is regardless, actually, all politicians actually, now that they are talking about what is really should happen in Egypt in terms of economics, all of them, even the most extreme socialists, talking about increasing the competitiveness of the Egyptian economy so they can export more and so on and so on. The third one, shrinking the size of the informal economy. Why? Differently. First, for government to get taxes. You have to transfer the informal economy into formal economy in order to get taxes. You don't care about this guy, but you really take care about his taxes. Very well. So regardless, actually, if you are governor, if you are in power, you have incentive to transfer this informal economy into formal economy as much as you can. Also, the diversification of the structure of the Egyptian economy. Also, everyone is talking about modernized economics of Egypt, industrialization, and the new services introduced. Everyone in the political system, from the right to the left, the extreme right to the extreme left. And also, the role or the social role of the government should be revisited. Anyone comes in Egypt into the power in Egypt, he will revisit the role of government in social issues. So what I will do, I will give you every one of these, and I try to give you both of the opportunities regarding this issue or an aspect of a transformation, and the threats that may threat actually the transformation in this specific aspect of transformation. Regarding enhancing the role of the private sector in Egypt, we have, as economists in Egypt, some opportunities. We should benefit from these opportunities in order to enhance the role of the private sector. First, the government incentive. As we said, the government has really good incentive to encourage the private sector. No government right now can say that we don't like the private sector. We should go back to the public sector. Why? If you don't have the money to run new projects, and you need actually to reduce and lower the unemployment rate, so you need investment. Who will do the investment? The private sector. Then even you don't like the private sector, okay, let us make him do that. So anyway, the government itself has the incentive. Even if you got into the power the most extreme socialist guys, he will have this incentive. So this is transformation has to take place. The second, also encourage investors. As we said, it encourages investors, and even foreign investors. They start to encourage them and having them to come here and visit. This means what? This means what? Well, this means actually that if you encourage investors, especially foreign investors, then you have to have incentive package for the private sector. You have to encourage the private sector as an other one. So it is actually you have to do it. Many foreign investors actually also have interest in investing in Egypt, especially from Arab nations. Why Arab nations now is oriented to invest somewhere far from America and far from Europe and go back to the Arab just to feel their secure about their money and so on. And guess what? And the also yield is very high there. Because of corruption, they give huge benefits that they cannot get it anywhere in the world. So it is better to have actually your money invested in Egypt, where you have a very high yield, and at the same time you show on in the TV as the president of Congo, Sultan, whatever, saying we are supporting the Egyptian economy, we are supporting Egyptian people, and this will have a good actually advantage to your people. So good. The new infrastructure in Egypt, actually one of the enhancing private sector. I remember one day I have a meeting with the Chinese investors that they have interest in investing in Suhaj, my hometown. And I asked them a very simple question: why you are interested in investing in Suhaj, especially not in Cairo or Alex? And they told me what? Guess what? The infrastructure you have in Suhaj was built in last 10 years, which means a new infrastructure that we can depend on in building our manufacturers and so on and so on. It is like it is a virgin environment. So it is you are the best one. So if you're talking about the new infrastructure in Egypt, it is actually increasing the role of the private sector. Here we have some threats regarding the transformation relating to enhancing the role of the private sector. The first threat is political instability. If you are an investor and you know that if you go and you invest in Egypt, your return will be very high. But unfortunately, there is political instability there, that it could end up by losing your money. Are you going to invest there? No. Political instability means what? Means high risk. We interpret it as economists, we explain it as economists in terms of money, high risk, which means what? That political instability threats actually enhancing the role of a private sector. Why? Because investors are afraid to invest in such political instability environment. Foreign investors also afraid. Going back to the Chinese businessman, they told us when we contacted them saying why you are not coming to invest, and they were about to build some manufacturer that it will hire 27,000 Egyptian, huge manufacturers. And they told us, well, after the political issues in Egypt solved, we will come. But during this time, no way that we come from China to invest in your country. It is unstable. So political instability, actually, it is one major issue that actually a threat the role of the private sector in Egypt. The slow improvement of business environment. Yes, I can see that we used to have one of the most awful business environment in Egypt. Now, we are working very, very hard in order to solve this problem and enhancing actually and making and improving the business environment regarding the rules and law that governs and control and manage the investment in Egypt. So one of the threats actually that there is improvement in regarding the environment, the business environment. It is slow, which make it threats actually, huge threats. So for the private sector. For me, one of the main issues that I'm talking about in my campaign in Egypt, parliament campaign, that one of the 4 things that I'm going to work on is improving the business environment in Egypt. This is one of the main 4 points that I'm keeping telling people this is what I'm going to do if I get into the parliament in Egypt. One of the 4 issues is improving the business environment in Egypt. So it is we really getting, but if the slow improvement or the improvement start to be slow and continue to be slow like that, it completely presents a very huge threat in terms of enhancing the role of privacy. Corruption. Corruption. You don't expect you have a revolution. Corruption will blow. It is not bubbles. They are not bubbles, right? They are not bubbles to blow once you have revolution. Sometimes you have revolution, you get more corruption. Sometimes you have a revolution, you end up by more corruption. So corruption really, until now in Egypt, it present or the role, enhancing the role, very big threats regarding enhancing the role of a private sector. But at least now, Egyptians, we know that we have corruption. We talk about it. And we, as the young people, taking some measures to prevent it, which we cannot do it, we could not do it before. So, before we knew that we had corruption, we talked it in persons, or sometimes in the newspapers. We don't do anything regarding that. Why? Because it's who will be with the corruptive people, the very well connected people. Okay? Now, the new things that now we can talk about it very loudly. And even we can explain it in detail. And we start to do something about it. Anything that comes out, thank you for Facebook. That here is the case. And that, boom, everyone is talking about this corruption. But still, there is a huge corruption there. But I believe it's getting a little bit down over time. The second one, enhancing the competitiveness of the Egyptian economy. Opportunities for that. There is a huge public demand regarding reviewing all institutional framework regarding investments, actually. Why? Because all these businessmen, when they try to get into business, to start to do their own business, to start their own business, they find lots of procedures to do. Guess what? Foreigners don't get such obstacles. Why? Because foreigners, if you are a foreigner, the government is supporting you. The government is working you hand by hand. So no one is blocking you. But if you are an Egyptian and you really want to invest, no government is you. You are with yourself in order to start your business. So you end up by really lots of institutional framework on rules and laws that governs investment issues. Really, there is a huge public demand. Everyone start to talk about, now, this is awful. We really have to do something, which is a really very good opportunity for us to use. The second one, the proposed infrastructure in projects like in Upper Egypt, Sinai, and Western Desert. I tell you, I will talk about only one project that actually proposed to be financed by European financial institutions. And the guy who is connected between these financial institutions, he come to Egypt and he met with the Prime Minister, the Minister of Investment, and meet with me, and I get into the TV shows around the 3 times regarding this project, which it's about that they got into the Western Desert and have a huge amount, a huge project that will cultivate around 400,000 faddan. Will have some industrial projects and advances that actually accounted that will hire around 65,000 Egyptian, and you will have like an free trade zone. That all of this, they are going to be connected with companies in Europe. Will be connected with companies in Europe, which means what? High tech will be transferred, right? If you are connected here with a company in Europe, you are working in behalf of this company, your financial institution compete with these guys, so you will have the opportunities of doing what? Of transferring actually the technology, the high tech from European companies into this area. But get what? Never is going to be stuck in this area. For sure it's going to be transferred to other industries in Egypt. So this is a huge opportunity in order to increase the competitiveness in this area. Also, when you talk about competitiveness, you find one of the issues that depend on that the World Competitiveness Report depend on the education system, right? Some education indicators. So, by informing the education system in Egypt, automatically will increase the competitiveness of the Egyptian economy, as it is cited in the competitiveness report. The way that calculated the competitiveness scale is calculated in some indicators. One of them actually the education thing. So by reforming education, and guess what? There is a trend. Any government is coming to Egypt, any president is coming into Egypt, into power in Egypt, he has to work to do something in reforming education. And we had been working in reforming education depending mostly on a project that funded by USAID, which is called Education Reform Program, since 2004 until 2009. So reforming education, it is really on top of the agenda. Also, when you talk about competitiveness, the new generation, the young people in Egypt, is really, you can say that they are crossing the gap between the West and Egypt. Okay, if I go back to my grandparents' generation, the technological gap between and the knowledge gap between my grandparents and your grandparents is like that. Between me and you, it's a little bit shrinking. The new generation, it is extremely getting very close. It is really getting very, very, very close. Thank you for the new technology and all this internet stuff and so on. So you get what? You get that the new generation that it has really, you can get into the new technology. You can trust him in transferring the technology, not like the old generation that is just staying, working, isolated from the world. You get into competitiveness. So you get now the new generation which enhance the competitiveness of the Egyptian economy. We have threats also here. The first one, unfortunately, until now, we don't have a clear strategy.
Don't you mean that there's competing strategies that don't agree?
No.
No?
I mean, we really, until now, we don't have clear vision about the future of the Egyptian economy. Why? Because I told you before that all of what actually occupies the politician's mind is political transformations and how can they get into power or political gains. They don't talking about a clear vision regarding the future of the Egyptian Egyptian economy. You talk about only the future, about politics, you try to get political gains and so on and so on, but a clear vision about the Egyptian economy. They have some initiatives. Yeah, this has an initiative and that guy have initiative, but clear vision. I tell you what, when Nasser came to power, what happened? Okay, it is wrong vision, yes, but it was a vision. We are getting from here to there, that's sad. Everyone in Egypt knows that we are going to this direction. When Sadat came, he said, okay, we are going to here. Clear vision, crystal clear. Now, we still, unfortunately, going forth a little bit, back a little bit. But so that the main threats here is there is no clear vision toward the Egyptian transformation, the Egyptian economic transformation. Where is the Egyptian economy? Why? Because now we only talk about the political transformation, not the economic transformation. One of the issues actually also increase of domestic debt and budget deficit in Egypt. And this is actually indicators for the competitiveness in the competitiveness regard. We have a huge public debt actually, as well as public budget. So it is really hurting the improvement of competitiveness of the Egyptian economy. Regarding shrinking the size of the informal sector, we have some opportunities. The first one, the government actually in 2009 established what it called a Slum Development Fund. Slum Development Fund. It is created by the Egyptian government, and all of this money is actually goes to two issues. First, improve the quality of life in the slums area. The second, it try to improve and develop the what we call it informal markets, like people just come here and buy and sell and that's it. So they start to do it. So we have this opportunity. Also, the government interested in solving the problem of street vendors. As I told you before, we have 4 million street vendors around Egypt, which is a huge number actually. So now the government has a huge interest in solving this problem of street vendors. So why? Because street vendors, basically can sit in front anywhere in the street and sell and buy their stocks. So the government, so they try, now they are making lots of traffic problems and traffic troubles, and they just control some streets and lots of headaches. So the government actually have the interest to solve this problem, which will actually help in this kind of transformation. The threats, political instability and security problem also. Now we have a political instability, we have a problem somehow in securities, so the government cannot actually enforce the law in the street vendor. Even you have law to control that, you cannot enforce it. Why? Because you have some social security and instability and problem. The second thing, the lack of finance. Guess what? If you really want to deal with a street vendor and tell him, don't sell your stuff here. Okay, well, he has to. He has a family to support, right? He has a family to support. And guess what? Arab Springs and Arab revolutions came from what? From what? From whom? One street vendor, guys in Tunisia. So now street vendors are really someone's you really take care of dealing with them. Okay, one of them burned himself for a revolution that go over many Arab nations. So when you deal with these guys, you really has to be deal with them in gentle way. Gentle way means what? Not enforcing the laws. That's it. So actually, getting the lack of finance is, so if you really want to solve the problem of this guy, you go back to the first one, which is the Slum Development Fund. The Slum Development Fund now has not enough money to make formal markets for 4 million guys. Okay, he has no money. This fund has no money to have like formal markets for 4 million young Egyptians. So you get a new threat here, the lack of finance. There is a diversification of the structure of the Egyptian economy. The opportunities for that, the government interest also in supporting industry and export. Yes, Egyptian government now is supporting industry and export, and it will support industry and export regardless its ideological background. They don't have other way to deal with the Egyptian people. They believe that increasing industry, supporting industry, exports will mean more production. Mean productions mean hiring more people. Hiring more people means put the pressure in the government a little bit down. So I'm telling you, this kind of a transformation has to take place regarding the ideological background of the future ruler and the future president of Egypt. He has to do that. He has the incentive to do that, and he had no other way. Actually, the new axis of development, as I told you, that we have a huge projects like Suez Canal project, Suez Canal development project, as well as the project that I told you about in Western Desert. We have some projects in Upper Egypt. In Suhaj, my governorate, we have at least 4 or 5 huge projects that it support the industry sector and exporting. So all of this a new axis of development, or a huge or giant project for development, will support actually to make the Egyptian economy more diversification, not only depending, as I told you before, in oil or some traditional economy stuff. Now also we have. The government has been supporting the small size and micro projects and business and small and medium and micro business investment. But the problem we had before, corruption. Because all of this money supposed to go to small industry, it ends up going to where? Connected guys to the president and his alliance there. So you support the industry. You support industry and export. Okay, so we will give money for everyone export, to outside. Who will export outside? The big business or the small guys? So you end up by paying the money for whom? For people they don't need it. But for sure, they want it. Okay, and they got it. Why? Because they are very well connected. So you got money to support a small industry, and it ends up by supporting the bigger one, the biggest one. We have a social development fund. We have what we call local development fund, and we have a huge amount of funds that are thrown into NGOs from Egyptian source and from foreign source. And in the next presentation, or the next presentation that I'm going to present tomorrow, I'm going to talk about international relation with Egypt regarding sending funds to Egyptian and aids coming from here or from there, and the impacts of this on the Egyptian economy and the Egyptian policy, and even in the Egyptian society, and how these funds actually change the structure of incentives in NGOs in Egypt. So this is I'm going to leave for the next presentation. But here, anyway, you have some opportunities that you have funds from to support small and medium and size industry, which actually it helped to change or diversify your structure. the Egyptian economy. We have threats here. Labor market. Unfortunately, the labor market structure is still now. You are talking about we're having 6 million Egyptians working for the government. 6 million. Talk about the labor force in Egypt around 25 million, 6, 5, and you get all actually the number of unemployment say that 11% unemployment, but in a very simple calculation you find it at least 30% unemployed. So anyway, 6 million people, working people for government, it is really a huge source of income in Egypt, and actually a huge part of working people in Egypt. So, and all of us know that people who work for the government, they have no incentive to develop themselves. They have no incentive to be creative. Why? Why you should be creative? And in a way, you will be upgraded and promoted according to the number of years you spend in your career, not according to your qualifications or to your performance. So if I was born before you 1 year, okay, be sure that if we were working in the same thing, that I'm going to be ahead of you 1 year. So that's it. So why should be creative? So here we have a huge problem here, which is the labor market structure and the incentives package in the labor market. So, but getting while now the younger generation, in my generation even, I remember when we graduated, most of us, at least 90% of us, was willing to work with the government, saying, yeah, working with the government give you kind of stability. You guarantee that you have something you depend on. If I really want to get married and I want to get to go to someone's house to ask his daughter to marry me, I tell him I am a government employee. I have a job for the rest of my life. I have an income for the rest of my life. Would you marry me? Yes, dear. But if you go to someone and say, yeah, I'm a very creative guy, very innovative guy, I can make money. I don't have a stable job. I make money, but I'm not sure if I can make it tomorrow or not. Then the answer will be no. No way. This is in my generation. But guess what? Now, my students, when I talk to my students and say, oh, guys, how many of you really wants to work for the government? Please raise your hand. Find very few hands actually saying, we want to work for the government. But the most of them, they don't work for the government. They prefer to be street vendors, but don't work to the government, which is a huge change in the Egyptian culture, change in the Egyptian culture that actually it supports getting into free market economy, because the people themselves, they really hate working the government. Do you know why they hate it? Very small salary. Very small salary. That if you work as a street vendor, that in 2 days or 3 days, you can get actually the monthly payment from the government. Okay? So that's, why am I stuck with the government if I can do something else? Also, the lack of finance preventing this. The time, yes, as I told you, changing or diversifying the Egyptian economy, having this big change in the institutional framework and the business environment. You cannot get it by only just pushing something, and wow, it is very nice and shiny. It cannot work like that. It should take some time to do that. But the main thing that we are an Egyptian, we are really willing to do it, and we are we started to do it. And our young people, they enforce us to do it. They will enforce us to do it. They will enforce us to do it. This is a message, really. Even if we get into the parliament and we try to, to don't work very hard on that, and I'm keeping telling people that this is one of the things that I'm going to really concentrate on, enhancing the environment for business and so on, and I didn't do anything about it. Do you think these guys are going to elect me again? Do you think so? No, for the best of my own interest, to serve their interest of doing actually what I was saying.
Sorry, on diversity, could you mention a little bit about what are the major parts of the Egyptian economy?
Yeah, I mentioned actually before. Yeah, so I will talk about the industry around 17%, the agriculture for 14% and something. And yes, and oil 15%. Oil and oil minerals account for 15%, and after that, Suez canals and tourism and all this stuff. Revisiting the role of the government. I'm almost done. I know that it is a very big day, a very long day, so I'm almost there. Opportunities, revisiting the subsidies. Subsidies. Okay, go back. Well, when you talk about subsidies, someone actually I don't think I'm in Slovakia, right?
They're depending on electricity from the subsidized windmill.
Okay.
Have a good day.
I tell you what, subsidy. Actually, the government know that it is very bad. They cannot afford it. They used to do it. Why? So they can have something to say to the poor people in Egypt, right? So they can get some support. But guess what? When you talk about subsidy, look for the structure of subsidy itself, and you know the corruption where. I get you the data for 2010, before the revolution. The subsidy in Egypt used to be around 80 billion Egyptian pound. 80 billion Egyptian pound. Okay? 68 billion used to be for energy and gasoline. Energy, electricity and gasoline. Who would benefit from it? If I'm a very poor guy, and I have only one lamp in my house, how much I benefit from the government subsidy? How about if I have steel manufacture, cement manufacture? How much I will really benefit from the government? So much. Okay. Also, how about if I don't have any cars? I only afford to buy for me, my wife, and my kids. Oh, wife don't ride bicycles in Egypt. So you don't care about buying your wife a bicycle for sure. So anyway, so if I only can afford buying a bike to hang around to go to work, how can I get benefit from the gasoline subsidy? No. But how about if you have 5 SUVs in your backyard? Giant SUVs. You have one, your wife have one, and your kids have one, and even you have some for save some for your grandkids that they didn't even show up yet. Then, whenever if you have, the more you're getting the richer, you will benefit from the subsidy. Okay. When it comes to food subsidies, which is only used to be 12 billion, guess what? Who will benefit from them? Macaroni industry. If you really have a macaroni manufacturer and you get subsidized wheat, you produce macaroni for sure you are not going to send them to Italy. You will consume in Egypt. You will consume in Egypt. Okay, you will benefit more, right? And if you're really very poor guys, that you just go 2 or 3 pieces of bread, how much you go? Oh, don't talk even about these manufacturers, guys, macaron manufacturers, guys. Talk about dessert shop. If you have a dessert shop, you make a dessert.
Like cake.
Cake. You get your weight actually very cheap because it's subsidized by the government. Put some strawberry, have a nice woman working around this cake, sell it in very high price. So who benefited mostly from food subsidy? Get what? I tell you something. Do you know that in Egypt you have that people find it is cheaper to buy bread, subsidized bread, and feed animals, cheaper than having animals' food. So if you have a huge number of animals, and this is, a very rich guy, and you turn away away one another, you get this bread and you feed your animals, you become richer. Okay? But if you are a very small guy, you get only 5 pieces of bread every day, and that's it. So who benefit from actually subsidies? Rich or the poor?
Rich.
For sure rich. for sure rich will. So subsidy. Now, the Egyptian government is revisiting subsidy, is starting really to leave subsidy gradually. And in this issue, thanks for the IMF policies and recommendations, actually, that push the Egyptian actually to adopt some policies to leave off subsidy. The tendency of people to have the financial ability to use the private sector, one of the major subsidized sectors in Egypt, education and health. We don't talk about subsidy anymore. I believe it is related to subsidy. What is going on? Okay. So you got actually education and you got health. These 2 sectors actually very heavily subsidized in Egypt. My students only pay, I believe, £50, which means around less than $10 a year in a university education, to get their university education. And get what? If they get into dormitory, they pay around 90 Egyptian pounds per year, which is less than $20. And they have 3 meals, they have some place to sleep on, and everything is okay. But the problem that actually Yusuf was saying in the morning, that okay, guess what? You get this public education, but I am a professor, and in my class, some of my classes reach to 2,000 or 3,000 people. I'm standing in the front of 2,000 or 3,000 people explaining them demand supply curve. Tell me, how can you do that? How can you do that? The main mission for you is not actually try to make them understand the supply and demand curve. Try to control them. This is the best thing in your mind, how to keep you this cloud. Just calm. So you keep them calm most of the time, and explain a little bit about demand and supply curve. And that's it. The crowd, you're like in a stadium or so. So the education itself also even little kids in elementary schools, the number of kids start to be very huge. Like you're talking in some cases in area in Cairo, it was 110% in one room, or 110 little kids in a room like this. How come you just put them, all of them, together? I have no idea. And guess what? The class only for 25 minutes, and the teacher changed. So you came down there and say, okay, kids, you stay here, you sit there, okay, I'll see you next time. That's it, nothing to say. So as a result of that, the education in public sector, quality went like crazy. You go back to the private sector. My kids in language school, which they study in English, and they have to choose German or French. Okay? The number of students we allowed for these people is 17. More than 17 in the class, no way. Okay? And the other size, it could reach to 110. Okay? The students get a very nice educational tools, overhead projectors and all that. And get what? Even they have swimming pools. And they have horse riding there. And they have a gymnasium there. They have everything actually is very, very nice. And they select nice teachers. Why? Because they pay them more. So they can get the best teacher in the governorate to teach us, to teach our kids. Why? Because they pay them money. But if you are a government teacher and you have a little money paid, so you go to tutoring, private tutoring. You concentrate in private tutoring, and sometimes you enforce your students to have your private tutoring. This is happening really.
Same in China.
So, in healthcare, you got a free healthcare in Egypt. Congratulations! You really got a free healthcare in Egypt. One of my friends had an accident. And he's a professor, was my professor, had a car accident. And he is very well known professor. And he was serving with the Prime Minister of Egypt. And they took him into the university hospital, that all the professors in the hospital knows him. But when the ambulance guys took this guy, he does not know who he is, they just put him in a chair and leave him in the hospital. No one is taking care of. Unless we came, what is wrong, and everything after that happened, But do you know, the doctor told us, we find that he has a broken arm or broken legs, and we are waiting to anyone come to buy this stuff, and we will put it in his arm. God, you got a healthy free. You got a free health care. Okay? But you have to get all these metals, How about if you don't have relatives around? You will be staying on this chair until you die. That's it. Why? Because you don't have these things to put in you. If you want surgery, you really need surgery. But you don't have someone to know you to buy all this stuff that needed for surgery. Then you go die. This is a free health care. That some people are dying for it. Guess what? You will die because of it. Anyway, if you die for it, be sure 100% that you will die because of it. Anyway, you will get it. You will get dead. Anyway, you die for it. If you miss dying for it, you will die because of it. Anyway. Okay, so now anyone has financial ability to send his kids to schools, to private schools, they will do it, directly. Anyone able to have health care in the private hospitals, they will do. Never they think, I'm a professor at university, I used to be a senior advisor for the governor of Suhail. I can say that I'm very well known in the community. So if I get into the public sector, the public hospital, I will be served very well. But I never did it. I never did it. Why? Because I don't trust it. I don't trust it. Many times people calling me saying, we have a problem here and we have to talk to be able to solve it. So when you talk about public sector in and education and health, usually even people themselves start actually to go away from the public or the government provided sector, which is actually shrinking the role of the government in these two sectors. Also increase the role of NGOs that dealing with people, with poor people, NGOs and civic society actually change it. Before that, people only used to see the government that can support them. Now you have the government and NGOs. So now it's a little bit getting a little bit far from the government. Threats, high poverty indicators in Egypt. That government has to intervene because there are lots of poor people that they cannot support themselves, and also inherited culture of people or poor people to depend on the government in many issues, poor people especially. In conclusion, Egyptian economy policies tends to encourage the private sector and reduce the role of government in the economy. And this in the favor of the free market, right? Second, Egyptian governments tend to enhance the competitiveness of the Egyptian economy. And this is in the favor of the free market economy. Egyptian government has financial limits on subsidies. They cannot subsidize. They cannot do it anymore. Why? Because they cannot afford it. So this is actually in the favor of the free market. Egyptian people have the tendency to use the private provider service in education and health, which they are the main sectors that they depend on the government and public sector, which is also in favor of free market economy. Egyptian culture regarding the role of the government, it's changing and developing. Yes, a little bit, but it is really changing, which is in the favor of the free market. The conclusion, Egyptian economy is moving toward a free market economy. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this.